Hare Krishna. Welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class in the morning. We'll begin with prayers. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pachatya Desatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkrupatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Sushushoshaddadanasya Vasudevakataruchi Syanmahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatitan Shevanat Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punyashravana Kirtanaha Hridyantasto Hyabadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवत्युत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी तदा रजस्तमो भाव कामलोभादयश्च ये चेतयेतैरनाविद्धं स्थितं सत्त्वे प्रसीदति एवं प्रसन्नमनसो भगवद्भक्तियोगतः भगवत्तत्त्वविज्ञानं मुक्तसङ्गस्य जायते विद्यते हृदयग्रन्थिच्छिद्यन्ते सर्वसंशयः क्षीयन्ते चास्य कर्माणि दृष्ट एवात्मनीश्वरे मदेकबन्धो मत्सङ्गिन् मद्गुरो मन्महाधन मन्निष्ठारकमद्भाग्य मदानन्दा नमोऽस्तु ते ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So today we are going to read the last concluding verses from third canto, chapter 22. So, alright. So 3:22:37. This is a section where Manu's rule or rulership is actually described. So now the verse that we will read will begin with 37. So Canto 3, Chapter 22, verse 37. Sharira manasa divya vayyase ye cha manushaha bhaktikascha katam klesha badante harisamshrayam. Sharira pertaining to the body. Manasa pertaining to the mind. Divya pertaining to the supernatural powers, demigods. Vaiyase, O Vidura, ye, those, cha, and manushaha, pertaining to other men, bhauktika, pertaining to other living entities or living beings, cha and katam, how, kleshaha, miseries, badante, can trouble, hari samshrayam, one who has taken shelter of Lord Krishna. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, O Vidura, how can persons completely under the shelter of Lord Krishna in devotional service be put into miseries pertaining to the body, the mind, nature, and other men and living creatures? Every living entity, purport, every living entity within this material world is always afflicted by some kind of miseries pertaining either to the body, the mind, or natural disturbances. Distresses due to cold in winter and severe heat in summer always inflict miseries on the living entities in this material world. But one who has completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord in Krishna consciousness is the transcendental is in the transcendental stage. He is not disturbed by any miseries, either due to body, the mind, or natural disturbances of summer and winter. He is transcendental to these all these miseries. Hmm. Okay, so when we go back to translation, okay, all right. So one who has taken shelter of Krishna, Hari Samshrayam. Okay. Divya in many places can mean transcendental. Here in this particular verse, Divya is pertaining to supernatural powers or demigods. Okay. Manasaha by mind. Okay, all right. Hmm. So next verse, we'll just read the other two verses also. Yaprishto munibi praha dharman nana vihan chuban nunam varnashramam cha varnashramanam cha sarvabhuta hita sada. Translation. In reply to questions asked by certain sages, he, Swayambhu Manu, out of compassion for all living entities, taught the diverse sacred duties of men in general and different varnas and ashramas. Next verse 29. I have spoken to you of the wonderful character of Swayambhu Manu, the original king, whose reputation is worthy of description. Please hear, as I speak, the flourishing of his daughter Devahuti. Hmm. Okay, so that's where we um, end this chapter. When we just go back to the chapter and take a look, basically this chapter is entitled as Marriage of Kardama and um, Devahuti. Yeah. So in this chapter, different character portrayals or the glories of these three personalities are being given, beginning with Swayambhu Manu glorifying Kadam Muni, and then Kadam Muni actually also mildly glorifies um, Mother Devahuti, and then the they returned. Swami Manu and his wife Shatarupa, then they returned to their capital. They're coming back, and yeah. So when they return, the citizens, when they welcome them, they glorify their place, um, this beautiful kingdom of Barhishmati, and then they um, glorify, or they glorify and share the joy of receiving Manu and his wife by elaborating or actually talking about the um, glories of the rule of Manu. That's what is happening here. So, rule of Manu, we heard from verses 33 onwards that he, his rule was in such a way that there was no conflicts. There were no conflicts. You know, basically the conflict was there was no discrepancy with the religious principles, because the whole kingdom he was actually ruling and directing the citizens to live in a very Sanatana Dharma way, actually religious way. And um, there was no degradation. So, although everybody was materially happy also, and even he was materially happy, he was a saintly king. Therefore, he was not like overpowered by the material wealth or opulence or fame or anything that he had. He was not over powered by that. He still remained a saintly king. And his long life he always used in being absorbed in hearing, thinking about, writing, and chanting about Lord's pastimes. His long life he did not use, in vain. He engaged himself in the activities and processes of bhakti. So that's how he passed his time. Um, there is description of how many years it lasted and all that. So now in 36 the description is that always thinking of Vasudeva, he transcended the threefold miseries. So when his time was over, he was, even before, he was he was a transcendentalist. What was his method of transcendental, how to become transcendental? It was directly contemplating, thinking about, hearing, chanting Vasudevas, names and glories and pastimes. Now coming to today's verse, 37. So no miseries for a devotee. That's what is given in this verse 37. That when one has taken shelter, Hari Samshrayam, there are, all these, in regular, uh, most familiar terms that we are used to calling these. It's Adhyatmika, Adidaivika, and Adibhautika kleshas. There are different kinds of kleshas, but they don't actually bother the person who is um, taken full shelter of Sri Krishna. So, what does that mean? Is not that if even when they're living in this world, does not mean they don't have anything impacting, but their consciousness is not shaken by any of the kleshas that happen. Because actual klesha happens in the mind. Actual trouble, when we go back and, when we come to the 11th canto, we will be hearing the Avanti Brahmana's pastime. He was a very miserly Brahmana who had a lot of wealth, I mean, decent amount of wealth, and he had family, but he would never spend it on others, or he would not spend it for himself. So he was keeping it so closed, and he wouldn't offer to the demigods, he wouldn't offer anything to anybody. They lived very frugally, even though they had means to live in a better state. I think there is some noise. 1 second. You can hold. I'll be back. I think the phone is ringing or something. Is it disturbing all of you? Is a alarm music coming to you?
No, Mataji.
Oh, then I'm okay with that. Thank you, Prabhu. So, um, So Avanti Brahmana was like that. And one fine day, uh, everything is taken away from him. He becomes, his wealth goes away and stuff like that. And because his wealth is not there, not just because of that, but because of his character that he had before, not giving charity, not maintaining even his subjects, and not maintaining himself properly. So there was all, because of all these kind of um, you know we can put it as anarthas, I guess, in our language. Because of all this thing that was the way he was living after he lost everything, nobody paid attention to him. And they actually insulted him to the core. I mean, the insults that he had, when we read 11th canto, that's intense kind of insults that we none of us probably would ever face. So such insults he faced, and but that turned him towards introspection, reflection, and trying to really contemplate on what's going on in my life. Then when he did that process, and he was also taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, that's what is written specifically. Because even though he didn't do much before, by some bhakti sukriti that he had gathered several years back or whenever it was, it it came up this time when he was in trouble. And he became quite detached from whatever was going on, and he tolerated quite a bit. Then at the end of it, he discusses, okay, who can be the cause of your suffering? He discusses, would it be demigods? Would it be your own senses? Would it be the Lord? Would it be the Prakriti? Or would it be the Jiva? It's very clearly, he kind of says, no, 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 no. And then, but who is it? Suffering. Who is suffering and who is inducing suffering is the mind. That's what he comes to. So, when we see here also in this verse 37, how can miseries pertaining to the body, the mind, nature, and other men and living creatures bind a person who has taken shelter of the Lord? Basically, the thing is not that nothing is happening to them, but they are not being bound. They are like a lotus leaf in the pond. Nothing is binding them. And when we read Bhagavad Gita also, we have these references quite a bit. Yesterday, we were discussing Bhagavad Gita chapter 15. And I'm just going there because there is connection. So we know, most of us know here what is chapter 15, Purushottam Yoga, and how the chapter begins is by description of this material world in comparison to a banyan tree. And even that banyan tree is a inverted banyan tree, like the upside down banyan tree. I'm just going into it a little bit to just understand the complexity of where we are living in. And Prabhupada gives how to extricate oneself from there. So this upside down banyan tree is compared to the material world. Okay. And in the banyan tree, even if it is standing straight looking at the sky, once you go in, there's like a lot of real broad, big banyan tree. There's a lot of things in there, secondary roots and primary root and branches, and there's multiple things. Now it's inverted also. So it's already confusing. So it's inverted banyan tree. And the inverted banyan tree, roots are going up, branches are coming down, and then the description goes further. Okay, the living entity who enters the banyan tree hmm, it cannot identify where is the beginning, where is the end of this banyan tree. One becomes lost in that banyan tree. So, of course, as human beings with 6 foot tall or five, whatever, when we go in a banyan tree under we only enjoy the shade, and we may not feel the perplexity of the analogy. But imagine like a little ant or a small spider or, body, living entity goes there into this inverted banyan tree, which has a lot of secondary roots. So roots are all over the place. And it is described, Krishna says, the branches are going upward and downward, not in one direction. It's going upward, downward. And then he says that this banyan tree, the dense forest it looks like, but there are like different nice fruits that are there. Like fruits, you see mangoes and oranges and apples and blueberries and blackberries and bananas, everything there in one banyan tree. I mean, I'm just putting at this. Krishna didn't say all these names of the fruits, but he says there are fruits that are very beautiful looking fruits. Okay. And naturally, the living entity get drawn to it. But then, what are those fruits? It's described. Krishna compares those fruits to the results of the actions, pious and impious actions of the living entities. So imagine, it's a confusing banyan tree, upside down. It's pretty dense. When one goes in there, one can get lost. And in between this, there are the fruits that are attractive. And then there's lush green leaves. Okay. These leaves that are there, very beautiful green leaves, who doesn't like natural greenery? It's very pleasing to the eye. And then these leaves are compared to the Vedic rituals, which are within the modes of nature. Okay. So these are all distractions. If we see, if then there's twigs are compared to the sense objects. So sense object means something that our eyes will relish, something that our um, taste buds would relish, something that living entities auditory or like oral reception will relish, something that a living entity sense of touch and smell will relish. So sense objects are there. So this is the upside down banyan tree, dense, quite a confusing structure where where is the starting, where is the beginning, which direction is it going, and in between all this fruits and lush green leaves and twigs. These are all kind of like giving a living entity thought, okay, let me explore, let me taste that, let me taste this fruit, let me explore that leaf, let me look at this one, let me hop onto that twig. So one gets lost in this banyan tree, right? And um, the only way to counter this banyan tree or to find an exit plan, because if we just imagine that we are trapped in a small body than this, like a tiny body of a um, like an ant, and then are we capable of mapping our own exit route? Are we capable of finding where the exit is? Yeah, there is a whole world outside of that banyan tree. But one who is indulging in just interacting with that banyan tree, whether it is in a, you know, seemingly good way or bad way, or good, bad, I mean, pleasant way or painful way, interacting with that banyan tree, one gets lost in the banyan tree. So Prabhupada says, I mean, Krishna says, and then Prabhupada explains that one should understand who is the source of this banyan tree and extricate oneself from this banyan tree and rejoin. I mean, I'm just paraphrasing the source. He says in text 4 or 5, 3, 4, 5, one of those verses. And then Prabhupada uses that word extricate. And then the process of extrication is cut down the banyan tree. Obviously, we cannot just stand there and cut the banyan tree. We can't cut down the material universe, but we cut down the banyan tree that we are having inside our heart. We cut down our relationship with this banyan tree. But we have become so um, indulged and engrossed, and whatever words we can put that signifies the depth of the relationship that a living entity develops with this banyan tree. Only way is to cut that with a strong sword of detachment. And then there is description about how does the detachment come? How would it come? Then it comes by associating with people who have the detachment. Now we see Manu. All he did was hearing, chanting, reading, and glorifying the Lord when he was ruling his kingdom. And then we associate with Kardama Muni, even though he is, like getting into Grihastha ashram for a particular service, right? But look at his austerities that he did, penances. After getting into the ashram, also we can do the same thing. Of course, in in a Kali Yuga, we are not, our austerities are not to stand on one leg and the mountain and be in a secluded place, and that's not our austerity. Our austerity is engaging in bhakti process as much as possible with our mind and consciousness. That is our austerity. With our, not just with our senses as required, but then with our mind, the chief of all the senses. So when we engage, that is our austerity. When we do that, what happens? Um, like this particular verse says, how can the miseries bind such a person? Miseries we will be going through, but bondage we don't have to go through. Yes, to varying degrees we may be like becoming or coming out of those bondages. Where it may be 20% today, but we want to make sure that we by practice of bhakti, by engaging and associating with those personalities, in basically in 15th chapter, 5th verse, the verse is nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama dvandvair vimukta. So the description of a transcendental devotee is given in Bhagavad Gita 15:5, and that's also the eligibility for us to become like that, to get to that state, which will take us back to. I mean, we are gradually going spiritualizing now, but complete spiritualization and transfer of our consciousness. I mean, I'm just saying transfer. Nobody's going to take and put it. I'm just saying for the like complete absorption would take place when we are having all those qualities of no false prestige, nirmana, nirmoha, meaning no, not getting into illusion, and then jita sanga dosha, not getting into false association, and then vinivritta kama, not getting into this intricacies of all kinds of desires and so all these qualities. And how do we get those qualities is very, very, very clearly we know is by associating with such qualified persons. Now, when we get there, that's why we are studying Bhagavatam. So we associate with these personalities. Now, next chapter, there'll be some description about Devahuti. How is Devahuti? What was she made of? In one, her consciousness made of, I mean to say. So, what was her personality? What was her character? And this is going to be described. And through all this, we also relate to Vidura. What was his character? He was sitting and hearing all these things. He was not an ordinary person, but then he would sit and hear everything. Whatever Maitreya Rishi would speak. So, therefore, by the way, we're coming back to the point is if one would like to get oneself out of bondage, only one way, in the sense, like a straightforward way, is engaging in bhakti process, which sometimes we may like to do, sometimes we may not like to do. Sometimes we may have strength to do, sometimes we may not have strength to do internally or externally. The favorable, unfavorable is going to continue in this world forever. But in between this unsteady situation, in the middle of the uncertain life that we have, and in the middle of this disturbing and unuprooting environment, one thing steady that can be done, or one thing steady we should probably uh, attempt, with all our hearts is to not let go of Krishna's connection with us. So that for that we engage in the process of devotional service as given and under the shelter of an acharya. That's important for us. Anyway, so when one does that, then things don't bind. That's why we're coming to back again. Swayambhu Manu's character is being given, where to sum up the whole point that we are discussing is that the miseries are not binding Swayambhu Manu because he has taken shelter of the Lord, Hari Samshrayam. So to that can happen while we are in this body, and eventually, of course, when we are completely um, have come back to our spiritual body in one of the four um, you know li- kinds of liberation. Anyway, so we will pause there. There are much more they're connected to these verses, but we'll pause here, and we pray that Srimad Bhagavatam, who is full of all these personalities and Bhagavan, may give us more and more um, focus to just connect with them and connect with all the personalities, thereby receiving the qualities of devotional service, which will unbind us. We can feel the unbinding effects even now, gradually, to varying degrees. Yeah, we may feel trapped many times, but we also feel liberated a few times. The proportion may be 80-20, but we still have something in our hand that we can keep going. So that is for today. So we completed chapter 22, and the last verse is 39, which is giving a hint about what the next chapter is going to be. Here, Maitreya Muni is saying, I've spoken to you the wonderful character of Swayambhu Manu. Now hear about Devahuti. So the next chapter is about Devahuti. Next few chapters are actually about her. So that's the power of Srimad Bhagavatam, giving us entry into all these personalities. So thank you so much for joining. Um, I'm sorry I went over time. Um, Normally I try to end and then we have discussion when it's over time, so probably we should end without too much discussions, so everybody can go back to work. But unless you have anything that is really would you like to share, I am happy to stay um, on the call. Okay, so I think everybody is off to work. Thank you for staying in the call, and Hare Krishna. Have a wonderful day. वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। मदेकबन्धो मत्सङ्गिन् मद्गुरो मन्महादना मन्निष्ठारक मद्भाग्य मदानन्द नमोऽस्तुते। जय